A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
I was looking at the benchmarks that came out earlier this month, and honestly, the industry is still reeling. We have seen a lot of shifts in the AI space over the last few years, but the most recent data on the Qwen 3.5 series from Alibaba is genuinely disruptive. It is one of those moments where the map of the industry gets redrawn overnight. Today's prompt from Daniel is about Alibaba and the Qwen models, specifically why a massive Chinese tech conglomerate would open source competitive models that are currently setting new records for efficiency. We are talking about a fundamental challenge to the dominance we have seen from Western labs like OpenAI and Meta.
Herman Poppleberry here, and I have been diving deep into the technical reports from Tongyi Lab all week. What is happening right now in Hangzhou is a massive pivot from being a fast follower to becoming the clear performance leader in what we call intelligence density. The most striking figure from the March releases is the Qwen 3.59b model. It is a 9 billion parameter model that scored 81.7 on the GPQA Diamond benchmark. To put that in perspective, that is a graduate-level science reasoning test where it outperformed OpenAI's GPTOSS120B. We are talking about a model 13 times smaller than its Western counterpart, essentially winning on one of the hardest reasoning benchmarks we have. It is not just a marginal gain, it is a total rethink of what small models are capable of.
That is the part that catches people off guard. You usually expect the massive 100 billion plus parameter models to own those benchmarks. Seeing a 9 billion parameter model punch that far above its weight class feels like a glitch in the matrix. It is like watching a middle schooler walk into a university physics competition and take home the gold. But before we get into the technical weeds of how they are squeezing that much intelligence into a small footprint, we should probably address the elephant in the room. Why is Alibaba giving this away? This is a company that is part of the backbone of the Chinese economy. They are not exactly known for being a non-profit research collective.
You are right to be skeptical, Korn. To understand the why, you have to understand the name. Tongyi Lab translates roughly to truth from 1,000 questions. It is a massive ecosystem, not just a single model. Alibaba is playing a much longer game than just winning a benchmark. They are currently in the middle of a massive transition from a research-heavy project to a core strategic pillar of the entire Alibaba group. This shift is being driven by CEO Eddie Wu, who has laid out a $100 billion AI roadmap over the next 5 years. He is betting the entire company on the idea that AI and cloud are inseparable.
$100 billion is a staggering amount of capital, even for a giant like Alibaba. It suggests that they do not see AI as a feature, but as the new operating system for their entire business. But that still brings me back to the open source question. If you have the truth from 1,000 questions, why let the rest of the world read the answers for free?
It is a calculated move into what Alibaba Cloud CTO Jingren Zhou calls Model as a Service, or MaaS. If you look at the broader strategy, open source is the ultimate lead generation tool. By releasing these models, Alibaba is effectively commoditizing the intelligence layer. They want every developer in the world to build on Qwen because when those developers need to scale to production, they are already integrated into the Alibaba cloud ecosystem. It is a way to drive triple-digit growth in cloud revenue, which we actually saw in their March 19th earnings report. They have maintained that growth rate for 10 consecutive quarters now. They are giving away the engine to make sure everyone buys their fuel.
So it is the classic give away the razor to sell the blades strategy, but on a global geopolitical scale. If they can make Qwen the default standard for open weights, they prevent Meta's Llama from becoming a monopoly. It is a battle for the developer's desktop. And speaking of Daniel's prompt, he asked where these models shine specifically beyond just being open. I noticed the multilingual support is particularly aggressive compared to what we see coming out of San Francisco.
That is a huge differentiator. The Qwen 3.5 397B model, which is their massive mixture of experts released from February, supports 119 languages. But where they really shine is coding and mathematics. In the most recent Live Code Bench rankings, Qwen models have been consistently hovering in the top 3, often beating proprietary models that cost 10 times more to run. The secret sauce seems to be their synthetic data pipeline. Because Alibaba has access to a massive internal ecosystem, everything from Taobao for commerce to DingTalk for enterprise communication, they have a unique data flywheel. They are using their larger models to generate incredibly high-quality synthetic reasoning chains to train these smaller, small series models.
I love that you mentioned the small series because that is where the intelligence density phrase really comes from. It feels like they are optimizing for the edge. While everyone else is building bigger and bigger data centers, Alibaba seems obsessed with making sure these things can run on a laptop or even a high-end phone without losing the ability to solve complex physics problems. They released the 0.8B, 2B, 4B, and 9B models all at once on March 1st. That is a very specific range.
They are targeting the hardware constraints of the real world. This is where we need to talk about the hardware-software co-design, which is the part of the story most people miss. Alibaba isn't just a software company. Their internal chip unit, T-Head or Pingtuj in Chinese, which actually means honey badger, just launched the Qwen C950 on March 24th. It is a 5-nanometer RISC-V processor specifically optimized for what they call agentic AI. They are building the brain and the skull at the same time. When you have a RISC-V chip that has custom instructions specifically for the attention mechanisms in the Qwen architecture, you get performance gains that you simply cannot achieve by running a generic model on generic hardware.
The Honey Badger unit. I love that name. It implies they are scrappy and willing to fight bigger opponents. And it seems they have to be, given the global trade environment. If you cannot buy the top-tier H100s or Blackwell chips from NVIDIA because of export restrictions, you have to innovate your way out of the corner.
Precisely. As of February 2026, Alibaba has already shipped over 470,000 of these proprietary Zhenwu and Qwen T series chips. They are building a fortress that is immune to Western GPU export restrictions. By optimizing the Qwen 3.5 models to run perfectly on RISC-V architecture, they are essentially future-proofing their entire AI stack. They are proving that you do not need a massive cluster of restricted NVIDIA chips if you can make a 9 billion parameter model reason like a giant on your own custom silicon. It is a very pragmatic, survivalist approach to AI development that has turned into a massive competitive advantage.
It makes you realize that the intelligence density we keep talking about isn't just a technical achievement, it is a necessity. If you have limited compute, you have to make every single parameter earn its keep. You cannot afford the lazy scaling we have seen in some Western models where they just throw more parameters at a problem until it breaks. But let's talk about the leadership for a second, because that has been the source of some drama recently. Daniel asked who leads this effort, and the answer just got a lot more complicated with the news from March 5th.
The departure of Lin Junyang was a massive shock to the community. He was the core technical lead, the visionary behind the Qwen project. Following him, Yu Bowen, who headed up post-training, also resigned. This has sparked a huge debate about brain drain and internal friction. When a project moves from a nimble research lab like Tongyi Lab into a group-level strategic initiative, the culture changes. It becomes more about corporate standardization and less about experimental breakthroughs. Jingren Zhou, the cloud CTO, has stepped in to lead the team directly for now. He is a former Microsoft executive, very seasoned, and he was recently elevated to the 17-member Alibaba partnership.
It sounds like the classic transition from the founder phase to the scaling phase. Lin Junyang likely wanted to keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible, while the corporate side wants to make sure the Qwen app keeps hitting its 300 million monthly active user targets and driving cloud credits. It is a tension we see in every big tech company, but when it happens in the middle of a global AI arms race, people start wondering if the magic is going to disappear. Do you think Jingren Zhou can maintain this momentum?
he is certainly the right person for the model as a service era. He understands how to bridge the gap between high-level corporate strategy and deep research. But the risk is that the honey badger spirit might get diluted by corporate bureaucracy. However, the Qwen ecosystem is already so massive that it might have its own gravity now. We saw over 1 billion cumulative downloads on Hugging Face in January. When you have that many developers using your weights, providing feedback, and building fine-tunes, the community starts doing some of the heavy lifting for you. We actually touched on this dynamic in episode 67D when we talked about the difference between truly open source and just open weights. Alibaba is definitely in the open weights camp, but they are providing so much value that the distinction is starting to matter less to the average developer.
It is also worth noting how much they are leaning into the agentic side of things. We talked about the cursor incident back in episode 1471, where Western developers realized that some of the best coding tools were secretly using Chinese models under the hood because they were just better at following complex instructions. Alibaba is leaning into that. They want Qwen to be the brain for everything from autonomous delivery bots in their logistics network to the customer service agents on Taobao. By open sourcing the base models, they are letting the world debug their agentic frameworks for them. It is brilliant, if a bit ruthless.
Ruthless is exactly how you describe a company that has to navigate both intense global competition and strict domestic regulations. One of the things that makes Qwen shine is how it handles safety and alignment. They have developed some of the most sophisticated constitutional AI techniques to ensure the models stay within the bounds of both corporate and state requirements, while still remaining useful for technical tasks. It is a delicate balancing act. They are basically proving that you can have a highly aligned model that doesn't lose its intelligence density.
I find it funny that a 9 billion parameter model is beating these massive Western models because it kind of proves that we have been lazy with our compute. We just kept throwing more GPUs at the problem. Alibaba, out of necessity, had to be smarter. It reminds me of what we discussed in episode 1479 about the speed of thought and the new era of inference. It is not about how big your brain is anymore. It is about how fast and efficiently you can use it. If I am a developer today, and I am looking at Meta's Llama 4 or whatever OpenAI is cooking up, why do I pick Qwen? Is it just the benchmarks, or is there something more practical?
It is the combination of three things. First, the vertical integration. If you are running on Alibaba Cloud, the optimization for Qwen is baked into the hypervisor level. Second, the multilingual encoding performance. If your application isn't strictly English-centric, Qwen is often the superior choice by a wide margin. And third, the small model performance. If you need to deploy on the edge, on a device without a constant internet connection or a massive GPU, the Qwen 3.59B is currently the gold standard. It is the first time we have seen a small model that doesn't feel like a dumbed-down version of a larger one. It can actually reason through complex math and science problems.
So, for the engineers and tech strategists listening, what is the actionable takeaway here? How should they be tracking the Jingren era of Alibaba AI?
The first thing is to stop treating Chinese models as alternatives and start treating them as the benchmark for efficiency. If your current stack requires a 100 billion parameter model to do what Qwen does with 9 billion, you are overpaying for compute. Second, watch the RISC-V space. The Qwen TC950 launch is a signal that the hardware and software are merging. If you are building edge devices, you need to be looking at how these models perform on non-NVIDIA silicon. And third, keep an eye on the brain drain. If we see more top researchers leaving Tongyi Lab for startups in Beijing or Shanghai, that might be the signal that the innovation is moving elsewhere. But for now, the momentum is undeniably with Alibaba.
It is a wild time to be in tech communications, which is what Daniel does. You are essentially translating between these two massive technological ecosystems that are increasingly isolated by hardware, but still deeply connected by open source software. It makes you wonder what the next 5 years look like if Alibaba continues this $100 billion investment. If they can keep the talent from leaving, they might actually flip the script on who the fast follower really is.
The talent issue is the biggest risk. We're seeing a lot of these core researchers leaving to start their own labs, often with massive venture backing. If the Tongyi Lab becomes too corporate, it could lose the creative spark that led to the Qwen 3.5 breakthroughs. Jingren Zhou has a difficult task ahead of him. He has to keep the bean counters happy while giving the researchers enough room to breathe. But for now, 1 billion downloads doesn't happen by accident. Developers are voting with their terminal commands.
I think the takeaway for our listeners is that the open weights ecosystem is no longer a one-horse race with Meta. Alibaba has brought a level of engineering discipline and vertical hardware integration that we haven't seen from any other player in the space. Whether you are building a small agent for RISC-V chip or a massive enterprise cloud application, the Qwen models are proving that intelligence density is the new metric to watch. It is not about who has the most parameters. It is about who can do the most with the parameters they have.
And if you are interested in how this fits into the broader history of open weights, definitely check out episode 670. It provides the foundational context for why these licensing models matter. And for the hardware nerds, episode 1544 goes deep into the inference era and why the runtime is becoming the most important part of the stack.
I am still just stuck on that 9 billion parameter model beating the 120 billion one. It is like a middle schooler winning a university physics competition. It shouldn't happen, but here we are. Herman, I think you have successfully convinced me that I need to stop ignoring the Hangzhou benchmarks.
I will take that as a win. It is not every day I get to surprise you with a Honey Badger approved technical deep dive.
Well, when the Honey Badger starts talking about 5nm RISC-V chips, I tend to listen. It is a specific kind of music. But let's wrap this up. We have covered the what, the who, and the very strategic why behind Alibaba's AI dominance. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this show. Without that serverless compute, we would be stuck in the pre-AI era, and nobody wants that.
This has been my Weird Prompts. If you are enjoying these deep dives, a quick review on your podcast app really helps us reach new listeners who are trying to make sense of this crazy AI landscape.
You can also find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe.
We will be back soon with another prompt. Until then, keep an eye on the benchmarks.
Goodbye.
See ya.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the close from sloth